So a lot of people tend to be so satiated they don't need enough, and they just end up under consuming calories, and they end up with all the classic symptoms of that. They're tired, they're fatigued. Maybe they start having thyroid issues. On the opposite side, they see people gorging on sticks of butter, and they think, well, I got to eat all these sticks of butter, and then they get fat. And it's like, well, carnivore didn't work. Well, you're probably consuming too many damn calories, and calories do, in fact, matter, whether you want to believe it or not.
Today we are joined by none other than Dr. Shawn Baker.
What's up, Shawn? Good to see you.
Good to be back, Joe. Thanks.
You're still alive. You've been eating nothing but meat and you're still alive.
We discussed virtually everything you need to know about the carnivore diet and went in depth on so many topics, including his story on how he discovered the carnivore diet 8 years ago, whether or not cholesterol is actually a problem, the main mistakes he sees people making on a carnivore diet, how to overcome weight loss plateaus, what he thinks about coffee and fruit, how to start the carnivore diet, and his opinion of the vegan argument. Yes, plants contain defense compounds, but these things are actually good for us in certain quantities, as well as much, much more. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to do and what not to do, so you can achieve all of your goals with the carnivore diet. So, Dr. Baker, first and foremost, thank you very much for joining us today. I greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone watching feels the same. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Like I said, Max, thanks for having me on there. I'm interested to talk to your audience, and I know you got a bunch of questions for me, so I will be happy to answer as many as I can.
Awesome. I'll fire away for you then. So you're obviously doing great now. You're breaking world records. You're quite possibly the most jacked 57-year-old on the planet. But can you take us back all the way before you started the carnivore diet? What was life like for Dr. Baker, to go on such an extreme diet? Usually, there's some sort of symptoms that are unpleasant for most people. So what was life like?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think most people don't make a change unless there's some source of pain for them. And my source of pain at the time, and it wasn't directly what led me to carnivore. I kind of wound my way there, but I was, I don't know, 42, 43 years of age, just wasn't happy where my health was. I mean, I literally had won Highland Games world champion as a throwing athlete, which, I was a pretty powerful, pretty strong guy, pretty fit, trained pretty hard. I was working as a surgeon, so I was quite busy with that. I had 3 small children. So, I mean, I was a busy guy, but still making ends meet and still training hard. I decided that at that time I was probably 130 some kilos at that point, 135 kilos, something like that. And big guy. I'm 6'5", so I'm pretty tall. And I decided, I'm just too heavy right now, so I'm going to lose some weight. And I wasn't feeling that good. I had probably metabolic syndrome. Maybe I was pre-diabetic. I don't know. I wasn't sure. Not sleeping well. So I went on this sort of diet, which was low fat. It was lots of vegetables. It was lots of, it was lean protein. I worked out 3 times a day. I remember I'd get up in the morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, do a couple thousand jump ropes, go to work. On my clinic days, I go in my lunch hour and go to the gym that we had near the office and train, come back to work, finish my day, put my kids to sleep. At night, do another couple thousand jump ropes. I did that over a period of 3 months, and I lost 50 pounds. I got leaner, I looked better, but I felt awful. I mean, I was literally hungry all the time. I was like, the nurses were like, man, we like the fat Dr. Baker way better because you're kind of an ass, because I was just grouchy. I was starving. And I realized I couldn't do that long term. So then I, just kind of wound my way through different dietary schemes, paleo, low carb, ketogenic. And then finally in 2016, I jumped into what's now known as the carnivore diet, because I popularized that name. Prior to that, it was called a zero carb diet. So I was just eating meat. I saw these crazy, weirdo, wacko people eating only meat, and I thought they were nutty. But, but I thought it was interesting enough to try. So I tried it. Again, this is 2016, so 8 years ago. And I mean, within 30 days, I was really like blown away at how good I felt. I was like, wow, I was just about 50 years old at that time. And I was like, man, all the aches and pains I have are pretty much gone. I feel great. I'm sleeping better. My energy's better. My athletic performance was getting better. So I said, there's something really unique about this. So I then just continued to do it, convinced 100 people to do it on my social media. We collected data on them, and crazily enough, none of them died, and they all got healthier, and they lost weight, and their resting heart rate went down, and other things we could measure. And then I was kind of picked up on Joe Rogan's podcast back in 2017, and kind of from there things just kind of blew up a little bit.
Mm. Yes, that's interesting. A lot of people have very similar stories. They go with the old, they look at the conventional wisdom, which is to cut the calories, cut the fat, and they end up just feeling terrible. I started carnivore for a very similar reason. I do the whole bulking, cutting thing, and I just feel terrible. I'd have people say to me that I'm a different person, but like you did. But in a sense, I was very lucky because when I was looking into this carnivore diet, I had guys like you who had big followings, Dr. Chafee, Ken Berry. There's a lot of yous now. More and more doctors are coming over to this carnivore lifestyle. It's also influencers like Steak and Butter Gal. It's nice seeing younger people like myself doing it. But when you started, there was no one. Like you said, back in 2017, you had your first Rogan experience. It was a very small and sort of undiscovered thing. So what was it that made you think, you know what, let's try this all meat thing?
Well, as an athlete, I was always interested in athletic performance, and I was already sort of, following a sort of a ketogenic diet, low carb diet, and having pretty good success with that. So I knew I could do well without carbohydrates. And then I looked at, the potential additional benefits that actually meat had. I mean, I was thinking like, what's the real benefit from this low carb diet? Is it because I'm not eating carbs? Is there something else? Is the nutrition better? And I was just sort of curious enough to say, hey, let me just try this, because I'm hearing so many other people talking about reversal of disease and feeling better. And there wasn't a lot of talk about athletic performance, but I kind of surmised that it might be beneficial in that regard. And so that's what really drove me. Plus this curiosity, see what it would do to my body. I knew a month was, like a month, what's going to happen in a month? Nothing too much, but so, I mean, that's really what it was. I mean, just curiosity, personal curiosity, and willingness to just do extreme things. I'm always kind of been, I'm extremely competitive. I don't mind pushing my body. I've done like crazy workouts where it's just extreme stuff to try and see what happens.
Mhm. And so when you first made the switch from this low fat sort of, I guess, lots of salad approach diet, lots of plants, lots of veggies, those sorts of things. When you first switched to the carnivore diet, what did you notice straight away? Did the energy increase? The weight come down? What happened?
Well, I didn't go straight from a low fat diet to carnivore. At that point, I was on a ketogenic diet when I went to carnivore. So I went from the low fat diet to a higher fat diet. I just felt better. I just wasn't so damn hungry. I mean, that's what I really noticed. When I went from a ketogenic diet to a carnivore diet, one of the couple things that really stood out to me is, one was my digestion became so much better, because I was eating a lot of salads and, leafy green vegetables, as ketogenic diets were promoting back then. People were talking about how much vegetables are on the ketogenic diet. And I was fully embracing that. I mean, eating all these, 1 pound spinach salads. And the only part I liked was the eggs and bacon and, berries and stuff and nuts I put on there. I didn't really care for the salad, but I ate it anyway. But I immediately noticed that like my digestion got so much better. I literally didn't even notice I was digesting anymore. It was like I couldn't tell I'd eaten anything. I was just that comfortable. Whereas before, it was always, that's just mild, little bit of irritation, mild bloating. I noticed that within about a month, I noticed that this chronic tendonitis that I'd had in my right quadriceps, which I'd had for 10 years, just went away for the first time ever. And I tried everything I could as an orthopedic surgeon to fix that, and it never went away. I noticed that my sleep was better. I noticed that my athletic recovery was better. I wasn't getting as sore. I wasn't feeling as beat up after my workouts. I felt like I could train harder. So those were I think the major things that I began to notice. I mean, weird things like I no longer hiccuped. I was like, I don't hiccup anymore. This is weird, because I remember, periodically you drink something, you like start hiccuping, and that just went away. I was like, that's kind of weird. It's not something most people care about, but I just think it's unusual or interesting. It's like weird things like that happen.
Mhm. For many people, they go on keto and, like yourself, things improve, but they're not truly their 100% best self. Obviously, these plants contain many defense compounds, lectins, tannins, those sorts of things that we know are problematic for some individuals. Why do you reckon that, what is the argument that you would make to people in removing those last plants, even the low carbohydrate vegetables, in terms of how it would improve their health?
Well, just because it does for a lot of people. I mean, that's as simple as it is. It is what it is, man. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, I mean, I see a lot of people where they have a clean diet. They don't eat junk food. They don't eat processed food. They're eating meat and some, fruits and vegetables. And for some people, removing those helps. And so it's worth trying. I mean, it may not be the right answer, but it certainly is worth trying if you're not. Now, if you're fine, if you're eating, a diet that is devoid of ultra processed garbage and you're doing great, hey, good for you to stay where you're at. But for those people that still have some sort of issue, it's worth trying. And then for those people that are just curious, hey, let me see what happens. It doesn't make it, because I thought, on a ketogenic diet, I felt pretty good. I mean, I thought, I'm 50, you're nearly 50 years old. I mean, I'm supposed to have certain aches and pains. But then I went carnivore, I was like, wow, I literally feel better than I thought I could. So, I mean, it may just be, a curiosity. Do it for, and I would tell people, if you're going to do it, try it for 3 months. Don't just do it for a week or two. 3 months is what it takes, in my view, based on data I've collected on about 12,000 people, just asking when they noticed the major inflection point. So if you're going to do it, try it for 3 months, see what happens. If it doesn't work, hey, you didn't really, I mean, you ate a bunch of steak. Who cares? I mean, it's not like it's the end of the world. Go back to do something else.
Hmm. I'd love to talk to you about how the carnivore diet affects mental health. We have Dr. Chris Palmer from Harvard. Obviously, he's a keto guy rather than a carnivore guy. And he talks about how when he puts people on a ketogenic diet with these severe depression and anxiety symptoms, 1/3 of them see their symptoms like basically completely reversed, 1/3 see an improvement, and 1/3 see very little change. Now, the carnivore diet is obviously a low carbohydrate diet. If you have enough fat, you'll be in a state of ketosis. Do you reckon that if Chris Palmer put these people on a carnivore diet instead of the keto diet, he would see an even better improvement for more individuals?
Probably, probably.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know how much better, but I mean, certainly I think so. I mean, because I've seen people that have gone from keto to carnivore and seen increasingly improvements in mental health. So yeah, I mean, I think so. I think it's a better diet for this, for as a therapeutic tool. I think, in my view, it's the most powerful therapeutic tool. Now, it shares some of the principles of ketosis. It probably eliminates more irritants. It's probably, quite honestly, just better nutrition. So yeah, I mean, I think a ketogenic diet is a step in the right direction, and for many people, it's all that you need, and it's a big enough step. But I think for some people talk like carnivore is keto on steroids, and to use that sort of analogy. So yeah, I think it could be improved. I think Chris actually does put some people on carnivore. Yeah, I've talked to Chris a number of times, but I mean, it's harder to get that one through the IRB. In fact, we're struggling right now to get some carnivore study intervention trials on the ground, because people are, oh, we don't want you to do carnivore because it's too controversial. But yeah, I do think that he would see a greater percentage of people responding positively.
Hmm. Now, a lot of people they consume a lot of carnivore content and they want to make the jump, but there's one word that terrifies them, the C word, cholesterol. Can you explain to all the people at home who are thinking about starting the carnivore diet, but they're terrified of their cholesterol elevating, why it may not be the concern that we once thought it was?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, we have to realize that, does cholesterol elevate on a carnivore diet? And I would say that that depends on the person. I think it depends on, there's a nice study that my friend Adrian Sotomoda just did back in January of this year, looking at low carb diets in general and whether or not it causes cholesterol to increase. And the finding was that in very lean people, cholesterol will go up. If you're overweight, obese, it tends not to. And in many cases, if you're significantly overweight, then it goes down. So it's only typically, for most people, leaner people or people that become lean, that they see a cholesterol elevation. Now, the question then becomes, is in that situation cholesterol a problem? And the answer to that is we don't really know yet. Where there's information coming out that suggests that it may not be, and this is based on the work that Matt Budoff and others are doing at UCLA. Also, there's some, so it's probably that cholesterol is conditionally a problem. And most people have that condition. Most people in the United States and probably New Zealand and Australia that are overweight and metabolically unhealthy, you don't want high cholesterol. However, if you can fix those things, then again, it becomes one of these things where it may not be the issue we think it is. Now, cholesterol is extremely important for a number of functions in our life. I mean, it's part of the immune system. I mean, literally these lipoproteins participate in our immune system. So there's, in fact, just recently, within the last 2 weeks, a paper came out looking at LDL cholesterol in people with asthma, and they found that people that had low LDL cholesterol that were asthmatic had a much higher rate of dying if their cholesterol was low, and if conversely, if they had very high cholesterol, the rate of living much longer and not dying from anything is much greater. So um, I think it's one of those things that it depends on the individual. When somebody comes to me and they have high cholesterol, I don't tell them to ignore that. I say get some more information. You know, what information would I want? I want some information about your overall metabolic health. I mean, obviously the standard risk factors that we talk, family, family relationships and whatnot. And then probably ideally, depending on the patient's age, if they're over 40, imaging becomes important. So you can see what's going on in the vessels and if it's really an issue or not. Because there are some people that feel so good on carnivore. I mean, their life is literally dramatically better that they don't want to change. They don't want to change anything. They don't want to take drugs. They don't want to change their diet. And in those cases, you tell people, hey, there may be a chance that your risk for cardiovascular disease is going up. Many of them are like, I don't care because I feel better. I mean, literally, they're like, I don't care about that because I feel so much better now. And there's other people that say, well, what can I do to, manage this? And like I said, get imaging, get a CAC score, get a CIMT, get a coronary artery, a CT angiography, where you can kind of track this over time. That's what I recommend to most people.
Yeah, well said. The thing I usually say to people when they say that to me, they ask, "Oh, what am I doing?" And I tell them I'm on this all meat thing, and they tell me that I'm going to have a heart attack and die or get heart disease. I like to point out that these things didn't even become a thing until early in the 20th century. We've obviously already eaten meat, so I think it's a bit of a fallacy on many people's behalf, thinking that that red meat is what causes these things. My next question to you is obviously the proper human diet is for everyone, and you've been in the carnivore game a long time, you've seen everything. What are the main things that you see reverse on a carnivore diet?
Well, the main things I see are the things that are common: obesity, diabetes, mental health issues, joint pain, gut issues. I mean, those things, autoimmune disease. I mean, these things are as they become more common. I mean, I've seen so many just weird diseases get better on carnivore, things I would never expect, even genetic diseases, where things like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic connective tissue disorder, Tourette's syndrome, things like this that are, bizarre. Um, those things tend to get better. I mean, and it's my belief that I don't care what your pathology is, I don't care what your disease is, better nutrition is going to help it to some degree. It may not cure it 100% of the time, but it's definitely the right thing to do. Um, so that's what I look at. But I mean, yeah, these things that are really, really common. We have a lot of obese people. We have a lot of diabetics. We have a lot of people with mental health issues. We have a lot of people with gut issues. We have a lot of people with musculoskeletal joint issues. All of those things have gotten better on carnivore, can get better on carnivore. Now, is it guarantee that everybody's going to get a good result? No, but it's at least worth a trial. And like I said, because, if you go down to the healthcare system, it's the same old thing. Here's a pill. Here's a procedure. You may not need these pills. You may not need these procedures. It's like, and the other thing is you become dependent then. If you have a problem and the only solution is I got to wait for some guy to write me a prescription, now you're stuck. I mean, what if he doesn't want to write your prescription? What if he's too busy? What if he forgets? What if you can't afford it? I mean, you're sort of you become helpless in a way. And this is a way where you can actually do something for yourself. And that's really empowering.
If you're enjoying this video and you want to see more carnivore related content, consider subscribing down below. The more subscribers we get, the more incredible guests such as Dr. Shawn Baker that we can have on. Now, there are many carnivore versus vegan debates, and the more irrational vegans, they just scream at you. I've seen you going back and forth with I shouldn't say back and forth, more only them going at you. But the more logical vegans, they know there's these defense compounds in the plants, but they'll argue that the poison makes the dose. This idea of hormesis, and a lot of people think that fermented vegetables are good for the same reason. Now, obviously, in like the Mediterranean countries who consume a lot of plant foods, not too much processed foods, they're only living to 80. We know human potential is roughly 120. Do you think there's any credibility to this poison makes the dose hormesis argument?
Well, I mean, it's an argument. I mean, yeah, I mean, it does occur to a degree, but I mean, can you elicit a hormetic response in many other ways? I mean, exercise is hormetic. I mean, exposure to heat and cold are hormetic. There's a lot of stressors that we expose ourselves, which can produce the same effect without perhaps the side effects that you get. So it's not that eating sulforaphane or some other compound in plants does not have an effect on the body where you upregulate defense enzymes and so on and so forth. But the problem is there may be also ongoing damage that occurs that you could otherwise maybe not expose yourself to. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, there are people that live to 100 years old that eat plants. I mean, you can't deny that existence that does occur, right? It's not like there are people that are vegans that live a long time. So certainly, there's a point where there's a certain susceptibility. There's certain people that do other things to mitigate those issues. Um, I think that for whoever many people, and I don't know if this is 10% of the population or 70% of the population, we see a lot of people where the dose is sufficient in the standard diet, where because when we look at anything that gets a GRAS designation, generally recognized as safe, GRAS designation, that the FDA or maybe USDA, I think it's the FDA does that here in the United States. They say we find this food substance, when they create new food substance, generally recognized as safe. Well, what do they do? I mean, they look for acute toxicities. Does it kill the rats? Or sometimes they look at genotoxicity. Does it change? Does it make nucleic acid breaks and things like that? And that's about it. Doesn't do that significantly, then it's foisted upon the population. And then we may not find out about it for 20 years. Does it test to see if it gives you depression? No. Does it test to see if it gives you an autoimmune disease? No. Does it test if you get cancer with it? No. I mean, it's just, we don't know. We just kind of figure it out over time. And as rates of chronic diseases, particularly things like cancer, autoimmune disease, obesity, diabetes, they're all going up significantly. And in my view, much of that, maybe not all of it, but much of it is attributed to the absolute horrible food we have. And again, I would levy most of that at the ultra processed food industries. I know there's people out there trying to defend this right now. Well, there's some ultra processed food. It's not that bad. It's just some people say it's only based on how much salt, fat, and sugars in it. But I think, when you start looking at all these crazy ingredients, the carrageenan, the emulsifiers, the thickeners, the preservatives, the artificial flavors, the natural flavors, the colorants, you got some issues there, I think, for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think the hormetic argument, I think it's a valid argument in a way, but also, I mean, there's better ways to obtain hormesis than stuffing spinach in your throat.
100%. So for those of you, for those of the people at home that are watching this and thinking, this carnivore, it sounds great, it makes sense. I want to give it a crack. How would you recommend they start? Do you think they should just cold turkey overnight, cut all the plants from their diet? Should they ease into it? We have these things like oxalate dumping, keto flu, the gastrointestinal issues when people start. What would you say is the best way to begin a carnivore diet?
Well, again, I think it depends a little on the person. If you're like a young, healthy person, you're already low carb, yeah, you can just jump right in. I think there's minimal downside. I mean, for someone who is like carb addicted, carb reliant, standard American junk food, standard whatever Western diet, lots of medical issues, you probably are going to be someone that's going to benefit from some level of transition. You probably might want to have, particularly if you're on a lot of medications, some sort of medical oversight. That's specifically why we set up our company Rivero, because some people will develop issues, transitioning, and you need to be taken off your medications in a very careful way. So for some people, I mean, just jump right in. I mean, the way I transitioned, and I think this is a reasonable way as any, I just had one carnivore meal. I remember one day I woke up, I had steak and eggs for breakfast. I didn't have toast. I didn't have juice. I didn't have some fruit. I didn't have yogurt. And I was like, okay, that was good. I didn't, I enjoyed it. Nothing bad happened to me. And then I just kind of added meals in. And I transitioned. I read about in my book, The Carnivore Diet, I write about, ways to transition. So I think you can do it either way. One, it's like taking a bandage off. You can either rip it off real fast or you can kind of slowly peel it off. Dad might rip it off, mom might, put water on it and slowly try to, move it off there. So it's, I mean, for some people, ripping the band-aid off real hard is too much for them. And they get all these transition issues, and they get hypoglycemic, and they get hypotensive, and they get really, really, just poor energy, and they just feel awful, and they can't stick to it. So there's got to be, for many people, I think transitioning makes pregnant women, for instance. I don't think a pregnant woman should jump right in because there's going to be so many fluid shifts and things like that. But if you're going to do it while you're pregnant, you need to ease into it.
Hmm. One thing that really affects people's ability to stay on the carnivore diet, or even if they've been on it for a while and they slip off it, getting back on can be difficult, and that is due to sugar cravings. What would your advice be to people who just can't seem to beat them?
Well, I mean, you have to realize the physiology of cravings, right? Cravings are typically time limited. They're often tied to hormonal fluctuation. I'll give you a great uh, example of this. So let's just say, and most of us have experienced this. We eat dinner and it's like 9 p.m. and it's getting close to bedtime, and you're still kind of hungry, and you're like, man, I just want to, like, let's give me something sweet, a little bit, like a little piece of chocolate or something. And you look around your cabinet and there's nothing there, and you kind of like, "Ah, crap." You go to bed kind of bummed because you didn't get your little chocolate treat or whatever. And then you wake up the next morning and you're not hungry. And you're like, well, wait, I was hungry back at 9 o'clock, and now it's now 8 or 9 hours later and I'm not hungry. What happened? Well, what happened was the hormones that were surging at 9 p.m. have now subsided. And there's one in particular called ghrelin, who many people are aware of ghrelin at this point. And there's others, but I mean, this one we know uh, often will peak in the evening, and it often will last about 30 to 45 minutes. And so if you know the cravings are coming, just plan for them. Because I tell people, what's your plan for cravings? And what do you mean plan? So yeah, you gotta have a plan, right? So if you have a plan, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail, right? So it's like, what if I know it's going to last for 30 to 45 minutes? Can I distract myself for 45 minutes? Yeah, you can go for a walk. Go outside, go for a walk. Summertime is beautiful. Go take a nice stroll before you go to bed. Or, I don't know, call somebody, or engage in some activity to take your mind off. Go read a book, go watch a show, or go do something. Maybe you eat something different. Maybe you eat something that's, maybe you stretch your stomach out with a bunch of fluid. So because there is a stretch receptor that kind of shuts down satiety, it shuts down hunger for a while. And those things are, last for a while. So you just got to beat it for like, you don't have to beat it for like a week. You just got to beat it for like that 35-minute period. And that's one day at a time. And then, if you F up, just get back on the wagon. I mean, the problem is people like, they just kind of justify it. And don't have the crap in your house. I mean, set yourself up for success. If you like, I'm going to do carnivore, but there's, 5 pounds of chocolate and ice cream in my cabinets, I'm going to eat that stuff. If it's in the house, it's going to get eaten at some point. So do yourself a favor. Um, you know, give yourself the most supportive environment you can. If it means getting rid of all the garbage, if it means having supportive family members, if you can. Now they don't always go in it. Sometimes it means having a supportive community, whether you find one online or locally or whatever. We know that having a supportive physician greatly increases the chance of success on this diet. And I know that from, again, survey data that I've taken. Again, that's why we have Rivero. I mean, we got supportive. All our physicians are like, yeah, well, they're totally cool carnivore. So anyway, those are some of the things you can think about.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I think time is definitely the most important thing to beat cravings. One thing on carnivore that is still sweet, which, I'm not sure, I want to know your opinion on, is dairy. Obviously, milk contains lactose. And do you think that dairy is holding a lot of people back on the carnivore diet?
Yeah, in many cases, for sure. I mean, you think of what is the purpose of dairy? I mean, dairy is to make things grow. I mean, grow animals, grow humans, grow baby humans, grow, I mean, we consume dairy as mammals, and it's uniquely designed so that we consume a lot of it. So it's very easy to overconsume dairy. I mean, if you're particularly disciplined and you can get away with not like gorging on cheese, or I mean liquid dairy in particular, it's so I tell people, again, depends on your goal. If you're trying to lose weight, which most people are, then drinking calories is a bad idea. So that's one thing. Dairy for some people, there's obviously a lot of lactose intolerant people in the world. There's people that are sensitive to certain dairy proteins, the caseins, and things like that. Um, that can be a problem. Some people will have issues with, like diabetics in particular. Sometimes, the little bit of lactose that's in there, which is, glucose and galactose is a disaccharide molecule, can be problematic. I think that I tell people in the beginning on the diet, if you want to include dairy, fine, make it a condiment. I mean, obviously ground beef, a plain bowl of ground beef. If I told everybody, hey, for the rest of your life, you're going to eat plain ground beef, I wouldn't do that diet. I mean, there's no way I would. I mean, if I can put a little bit of spice, a little bit of cheese on there, hey, it's more palatable. I can do that, at least as a transition time. And then I can decide if I want to keep it or not. So dairy, I think, is one of those things that it depends on the person. Like right now, I'm consuming a decent amount of dairy. Lean dairy because I'm trying to lean out, and I've got my own sort of rationale for why I'm doing it. But I think for many people, it's kind of a gray area, and you just have to proceed with caution around dairy.
Interesting. What are some other common mistakes that you see people make? Most people go on carnivore, they feel amazing, the weight drops off, but there are a few people who every now and then you'll see a comment saying that carnivore allegedly didn't work for them. What do you reckon is the reason for these people not achieving what they hoped?
Well, it could be a lot of things. It depends on what they're actually doing, because there are a lot of different interpretation of what carnivore means these days. And some people tell me about, they're eating, avocados and blueberries and grapes and a little bit of white rice and sweet potatoes and calling it carnivore. And I'm like, well, that's obviously not the same thing. I think one of the issues is under eating. We know that beef in particular is particularly satiating. We know with the sort of development of these GLP-1 receptor agonist drugs, the Ozempics, the Wegovys, Mounjaros, and Zeptides, or Tirzepatide, or whatever it's called. I can't remember what they call it. Zepbound is what they call it. That's a trade name on that one. Meat actually stimulates that GLP-1 very nicely, and there's great studies that show that. So a lot of people tend to be so satiated that they don't eat enough, and they just end up under consuming calories, and they end up with all the classic symptoms of that. They're tired, they're fatigued. Maybe they start having thyroid issues. Maybe they, just don't have energy. And I think that's one that many people run into. I think on the opposite side, they see people gorging on sticks of butter, and they think, well, I got to eat all these sticks of butter, and then they get fat. And it's like, well, carnivore didn't work. Well, you're probably consuming too many damn calories, and calories do, in fact, matter, whether you want to believe it or not, or however you want to, mass or whatever you want to call it. If I want to lose weight as an 8-year carnivore, I got to eat less. If I want to gain weight, I got to eat more. It's just the only way, because I eat the same damn stuff every day. Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between eating Twinkies and or whatever, Tim Tams or whatever the hell you guys got in New Zealand junk food, and steak, right? Um, yeah, there's metabolic difference, but once you're eating the same stuff for a long period of time, there's only so many variables you can play. Yeah, you can exercise more. I mean, whatever. But I mean, eventually you've got to change that relationship there with how much you eat versus, so on and so forth. So that's one thing. I mean, I think some people will overconsume fat, particularly rendered fat. And again, what's the difference between rendered fat and like if I eat a steak that's well marbled, and I chew it up in little pieces, and it sits in my stomach, it's still solid, right? My stomach's got to knead it and break it down, turn it into liquid little by little, and little by little, that liquid protein and fat kind of enters my digestive tract, and then I can absorb it. If you're consuming all this grease and butter and stuff like that, where it's already liquid, I mean, literally when you swallow a piece of butter, as soon as it gets in your stomach, it turns into liquid. I mean, it doesn't take long. Your stomach doesn't have anything to do anymore. It doesn't have to sit there for 3 hours being kneaded. So it just dumps it into the small intestine, into the duodenum. And then it can overwhelm it. And so then you end up with diarrhea. So it's like, why did you eat food? You just crapped it all out. That's a waste of money, if anything else. It's like, don't eat stuff you can't absorb, right? So, I mean, you got to be mindful of how much fat you're consuming. Yes, fat is very important. If you're not consuming carbohydrates, you definitely need fat. If you're eating a bunch of butter and then it all ends up in the toilet because you have diarrhea, that's just a waste of money, right? So don't do that. The other thing I think is hydration. I mean, we know that going on a low carb diet leads to a reduction in insulin, which leads to the kidneys to dump sodium, and then water tends to follow that. So you end up being relatively dehydrated. So early on in the transition point, you just might have to increase your fluid and electrolyte intake. It's something that many people will do if you continue to exercise, and like I do. I like to sweat. Well, I don't know if I like to sweat. I sweat because I work out and I like to work out. I just have to replace the electrolytes, and so that's something that is a consideration. Again, the other thing is mistake wise is to not consider the other lifestyle issues. I mean, I think it's a comprehensive thing, and I talk about this all the time in my little communities and the people I talk to. It's like, yes, diet is important. It's critically important. I don't think you can get healthy without a good diet, but there's other things that come into play. You got to get good sleep. You gotta, I mean, good sleep hygiene, get a good bedtime. Don't eat late at night. That's another thing. Eating a big giant meal. Carnivore lends itself to infrequent meal patterns, which I think are good. I mean, I think the problem we have is we eat, 7 times a day in many cases, 3 meals, 4 snacks. We're eating from 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. at night. That's a problem for most people. Um, I think eating a big meal at night, particularly a high protein meal, is can lead to sleep disturbances simply because of the fact that as we break down nitrogen, which is in amino acids and protein, that nitrogen has to be eliminated somehow. If it's not incorporated into our tissue, we've got to eliminate it, or it becomes toxic in the form of ammonia. So we have to excrete it through urea, and that's we breathe it out through water vapor, we sweat it out, or more commonly we just pee it all out. And so eating a big meal at night can often lead to poor sleep because you got to wake up in the middle of the evening to go to the bathroom, which again, not sleeping well is a problem.
Mhm. Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that energy thing because what I like to explain to people is, obviously fat is stored energy. So to some degree, even though calories aren't the best metric, obviously humans are an open system. But we still have to factor in that excess energy is going to cause fat gain. So I'm glad you mentioned that. My next question is that there are a lot of people, they go on carnivore, they lose a lot of weight, but then the fat loss sort of stops. I know I've heard you talk about sort of fat cycling. Some people like to do priming for a while where they eat lots of food to get the metabolic rate back up. What would your advice be to someone who's lost a lot of weight, but the weight loss has stopped?
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to realize you're a smaller animal now, right? If you start out 300 pounds and now you're 200 pounds, I mean, you still need as much food. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, I've got a big dog and a smaller dog. I feed my big dog more food than my little dog. So you just have to realize you probably just need less food now, unless your activity's gone up tremendously. So that's one thing. I think that, there's a difference from going from morbidly obese to kind of normal weight to going to where I want to get shredded. I want a six pack. I want to be ripped. To, I mean, I don't think being shredded like Instagram, whatever, bodybuilding shredded is normal. It's just not normal human physiology. So in that case, maybe you can't just eat to satiety, eat fatty meat to satiety. That doesn't work anymore if that's your goal. And so in that case, you might have to play with leaner cuts of meat. You might have to, and I find if I want to do that, I can only stand it for like 2 or 3 days. And I'm like, man, give me some damn fat or I'm going to go nuts. So then you can fat cycle and things like that, where, it'd be 2 or 3 days of leaner stuff and then a day of putting the ribeyes back in or something like that. So I think there's different, periods of time. And, I mean, if you are habitually used to being massively overweight, then even slightly overweight you may respond physiologically the same way as some guy getting ready for a competition does at 7% body fat, and he's just like, oh, I got to white knuckle this stuff. So I think there's some of that can occur. Now, I think the thing that's nice is that once you can kind of maintain whatever your new set point is for a period of time, then I think it's a little easier. It takes a little less effort, I think, but I think, there's, it's kind of a stepwise thing. You kind of, you do what it takes to get down to here. And it's relatively easy to maintain that, but to get to the next step, you got to do something. You got to push a little harder. And, there's other levers to pull besides, once you're like zero carb, there's no more carbs to cut out. I mean, yeah, you can play with the fat and protein ratios a little bit. You can play with the amount of food you eat, but there's other levers too. I mean, there's exercise. My God, if you're not out there strength training, that's a problem. Now, again, everybody can't start out that way, but eventually, um, we should all be getting stronger, or at least maintaining our muscle mass, particularly if we're older. But honestly, you can get stronger even in your 90s, so there's no excuse not to. Sleep, sleep we mentioned already. I mean, getting good sleep, not being sedentary. A lot of people, and that's the biggest thing. I'm standing right now. I mean, and as you notice, I've just been kind of like doing this, and my hands are flopping around. I'm just more animated. I'm just literally, you're just sitting there like a lump, man, because you can't move around when you're sitting, right? So you're literally just not expending as much. So I mean, I can't control so much how much body heat I generate. The calories out of the equation is largely beyond my control. But this thing called NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which I'm doing right now more than you are because I'm standing up. It's
Hmm.
just a simple shift you can make. Just stand instead of sit. If I'm sitting, could I be standing? If I'm standing, could I be walking? Um, you know, there's these other levers you can do. I mean, there's, I get it that there's a lot of problems with nutritional research. I think we've missed the mark on a lot of things. Meat is bad for. I think that's nonsense, but I think some of this stuff holds up. You know, um, I know there's people out there that tell me, oh, you shouldn't be exercising. It's bad for you. It's going to shorten your life because you're stressing your body too much. You're using up too many heartbeats. I think that's frankly just total nonsense. I mean, that's complete garbage in my mind. So I mean, like I said, it depends on, there's not necessarily an easy button. I mean, there's easier, but I mean, it's not like, oh, I can just eat meat and never do anything. And I'm going to have this beautiful model body. I'm going to be the cover model for the next, muscle and fitness. I mean, that's not going to happen. Sometimes you got to put in the work. You got to get after it. And I think that's realistically the thing. I mean, there's people that out there that never have been athletic, active. They've just been sitting on their butt their whole life, and they think that just by eating steaks, they're going to magically turn into some, you know, Adonis or whatever the female equivalent of Adonis is. Um, yeah, I mean, there's more things you got to do.
Yeah, I think the neat component of the carnivore diet is often incredibly overlooked. When your cells, completely heal, all of a sudden you have all this extra energy. I find in between sets at the gym now, even when I'm like cutting down, getting lean, I catch myself like pacing up and down. When you think about all the extra calories that sort of stuff's burning. Yeah, I think that's a huge component as to why a lot of people lose a lot of weight on carnivore.
Well, most of your caloric expenditure is not done in the gym. I mean,
Hmm.
unless you spend 7 hours a day in the gym, but I mean, most people are in there, 45 minutes an hour, maybe two if you're wasting a lot of time. I mean, like I said, I think you spend 2 hours in the gym, unless you're a professional bodybuilder, you're probably wasting your time. Um, so yeah, I mean, most of your caloric expenditure is going to be, and as you probably know, higher protein tends to drive need up even higher. So I mean, protein's your friend in that regard.
There's one plant that many people on carnivore are very reluctant to get rid of. Obviously, coffee is a seed, which is a bean, which is a seed, the most defended part of a plant. So it will be problematic, at least to some degree, to many individuals. You personally don't consume coffee. What is your opinion on coffee?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to the addictiveness of it from personal experience. I just don't like. I never like the stuff, so I just don't like it. I don't drink it. Um, in my experience, I would not quit coffee immediately if you're transitioning to a carnivore diet, just because it's such a stress. I mean, you've already got, this change in energy system going from carbs to more fat based. You've got this lack of fiber in your diet now. It's going to have digestive consequences initially, and to add, caffeine withdrawal headaches on top of that, you're just asking for a miserable experience. And so I would say keep the coffee in for the first, 3 to 6 months, and then if you feel like it, hey, there's still more you can do, or you don't quite feel that you're ready, or you're not quite where you want to be, then you consider dropping it. And in my experience, and again, these are just rough estimates, but about 50% of the people that drop caffeine or coffee will tell me that they noticed a significant improvement in their overall health. And about 50% will say, I can't tell a difference. Maybe they're just really addicted. They don't want to, they want to justify keeping it. But yeah, the benefits of caffeine, it's a stimulant. It's got some ergogenic potential. People like the ritual. It's just a habit for them that they enjoy. The negatives, I mean, obviously, it suppresses our appetite in ways, maybe in a problematic way. It can lead to mineral absorption issues. Um, obviously has an addictive nature. And literally, it's kind of funny. Every day, you drink coffee till whatever noon, you don't drink it too late because you don't sleep. And then you go like 12, 18 hours without drinking. The next day, you're literally going through withdrawal. You're literally that's why you feel garbage. Like there's people that cannot literally function in the morning until they've got coffee, and they're frantic. If they're at a hotel and they don't have a coffee machine in their room, they start to panic. It's like, oh my God, where's the coffee? My wife's from France. She loves her coffee. It's like hilarious. I mean, she gets up, she's got to stake out the coffee. It's their little fix. And
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't have that. But yeah, I mean, it can be problematic for some people for sure.
hmm My next question, which I feel is going to be a very short answer on your behalf, is are there any nutrients in meat? Are there any nutrients that we cannot get in sufficient quantities from meat? And do we need to supplement on a carnivore diet?
Well, I mean, if you look at the RDA, there's a number of nutrients where meat would be low. You think folate, selenium, manganese, vitamin C, obviously. Um, so yeah, I mean, if you went by the recommended daily allowances, there are a number of nutrients out there that would apparently be lower. It would be extremely challenging to get on a diet of say beef. Now you could cobble together a fully carnivorous diet if you included dairy products, especially with organ meats and seafood and meat and meet the RDA. It's clearly doable. Is it necessary? I don't think so. And the reason I say that is just because it is what it is. I mean, I see people that just eat, gosh, red meat, nothing else, and they do extremely well. So I think in part, remember our RDA was developed on a standard population eating a standard 50, 60% carbohydrate based diet, mostly grain, with a high percentage of grains, which we know can interfere with mineral absorption. We know that there's competition going on. We know that uh, certain minerals and vitamins requirements go up in a carbohydrate based diet compared to another one. So I think the ultimate answer is I think you can live a fully functional, happy, solid, thriving, even optimal life on straight up meat. And I think you can do fine. I think many people can do that. Now,
Mm,
yeah, I mean, there's some people that have known conditions or issues or previous deficiencies where they might have to address for a period of time. But I mean, I literally have gone years on just eating steaks, no organ meats, no supplements, no ground up organ pills, no, whatever, multivitamins. And so I think, it's my belief that humans have that capacity in general. I mean, at least a healthy human does. Um, so yeah, the short answer is no, I don't think so.
hmm Yeah, no, well said. My next question to you is, what does a typical day of eating look like for you?
Well, most of the time I eat twice a day,
hmm
and again, this is at maintenance. If I'm trying to lose weight or gain weight, I'll change that. I'll lose weight often. I sometimes eat less frequently. If I'm trying to gain weight, I'll eat more frequently. I eat red meat every day. I eat anywhere between 2 and 4 pounds of red meat a day, typically in the form of steak. Sometimes I'll have burgers. Once in a while I add eggs in there. Sometimes I'll have a little seafood. Sometimes I'll have some dairy products, things like cottage cheese or Greek yogurt, typically being the majority of that. That's pretty much it. I mean, I drink uh, water pretty much exclusively. Sometimes I'll add a little electrolyte mixed to it, depending on how much activity and sweating I think I'm going to be doing. Every once, so like I said, I'm not religious about this diet. Every once in a while, I'll go off the diet and I'll have a piece of cake, my kid's birthday, and but I mean, it's once or twice a year, something pretty infrequent, and that's it. I mean, it's I'm 6'5". I weigh currently 254 pounds. As of this morning, I'm on my way down to 240. Um, and I like I said, I have to eat a pretty decent amount of food. I've been doing this in the last, I guess, going on near 8 years. I've probably consumed something like 10,000 steaks. And that's not an exaggeration. I calculate because I eat, three or four a day for many years.
hmm
That's what it adds up to. So that's kind of what I do. It's mostly red meat. I mean, probably 95 to 98% of my diet in a given month will be coming from red meat.
hmm And do you still put salt on your meat?
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you do.
I,
Okay.
I I enjoy it. That's probably the only thing I put on my meat. Every once in a while, I'll put another seasoning on there. Like if I'm cooking for somebody else, sometimes I'll do that. I don't, I just, that's what I enjoy. The more I got into this, the less I wanted the distraction of the other flavors. I cook, I can cook meat pretty damn well. I usually get pretty good quality cuts of meat. I want to taste the meat. and I don't want to taste some syrupy sauce that masks the flavor. I actually enjoy the taste of the meat.
Mm-hmm. One thing that a lot of people are indecisive about is obviously Paul Saladino. He's very popular on the social media platforms. A lot of people have this sort of they're not entirely sure which path to go down, the meat and fruit route or the strict carnivore route. Obviously, you had an experiment, a 1 week experiment with fruit. What was your experience like, and what would you say to people who are going through that decision currently?
Well, I mean, I think ultimately you try them both, see what works better for you. I mean, that's the best answer I can give anybody. I mean, the reason I did that was not because I wanted to include fruit in my diet to see what it. I really wanted to see the effect of carbohydrates would have on my LDL cholesterol. I was kind of emulating an experiment that my friend Nick Norwich did with Oreo cookies. I'm like, I don't want to eat a bunch of Oreos. I'll just try carbohydrates. So nice happening. We have some apples in our house. My son, my kids still eat things like fruit and things like that. So I said, well, I'm just going to eat some apples, 100 grams of apple carbohydrates from apples a day. And I was going to do it for maybe a couple of weeks. And after a week, I was like, I just can't do it anymore. My stomach was just, it just didn't feel good. And I was like, I don't want to do this. And it didn't really impact my cholesterol anyway, which is, maybe I need to eat because I'm a bigger guy. I might have to eat 200 grams a day. I just don't want to do that. It's just, it's just not what I want to do. So, but yeah, I mean, I think in my experience, there are many people that try to add fruit back in or go the sort of the fruit and honey route, and they have issues and they regret it, and it wasn't for them. Maybe they feel better for a month or two, and then they eventually start getting the weight back, and their symptoms start returning, and their autoimmune symptoms come back, or their skin gets worse, or they put on body fat, and then they say, well, that's not right for me. I mean, but I mean, like anything, I'm not going to begrudge somebody from trying something. If it sounds good to you and it sounds more sustainable and you want to try it. I mean, some people say, well, if you're just a sugar addict and it's just another way to feed your sugar addiction. In a way, I mean, you think about it, if you're consuming 3, 4, or 500 grams a day of sweet fruit and honey, I don't know, maybe you're just a sugar addict and you can't quite get that. I know the rapey people are talking about their own sort of unique take on things, and I obviously think that's some of it's kind of not actually true, but anyway, that's my thought.
Hmm. Well, humans have been like ever since we started agriculture about 12,000 years ago, we've been crossbreeding these fruits to become sweeter and sweeter. So now they're just ridiculously high in fructose. And obviously fructose is, depends on who you talk to, 7 to 11 times more glycating than glucose. Is this glycation caused by fructose a problem, do you think?
Well, I mean, most of the glycation that occurs secondary to fructose is endogenously produced fructose. And you are correct that anywhere between 5 and 20 fold, I've seen some of the data on there where fructose is more potent at glycation. And I think glycation is an issue. Endogenous glycation and exogenous, you can eat advanced glycation end products, anything that's been seared or brown bread, brown toast, seared meat, all of it, I think those things are minor components. I think that um, uh, there's a number of things that drive that glycation process. Hyperglycemia is one. The polyol pathway, which involves fructose metabolism, but it's usually glucose going to sorbitol, going to fructose, um, is another issue. And again, when you have this endogenously derived fructose floating around, it is very potently glycating. I don't know how much the fructose ingestion drives that, because fructose is you've got um, it's processed by our liver and altered in some ways. And then, of course, lipid peroxidation end products also drive the glycation, and that may have to do with fats that we involve, which we ingest. And it's controversial. Some people would say it's the seed oils that's driving that, and there may be some merit to that. So I think, there are a number of studies that would point out that fructose can be a problem, particularly in the form of high fructose corn syrup. I mean, I think most people would agree with that. Now, people get defensive and say, well, it's different. It's fruit sugar. It's got all these other beneficial, vitamins and minerals, and it's limited by the fiber content. And I think some of that is probably of merit, is with merit, but the molecule is still the molecule. And for some people, it becomes what is excessive. There's studies on animals that show that, when you get into like 70, the equivalent of with an animal, the equivalent of about 75 grams of fructose which is a lot of bananas. I mean, the 30 banana peoples a day are probably consuming that. A banana or two, piece of fruit, probably not enough to be driving that particular issue. Now, it may drive other issues. It may drive gut issues. Like me, I wasn't eating 75 grams of fructose. Even though I was eating 100 grams of carbohydrates, it was still less. It was still less than, and again, I'm 260 at the time. So it would still be underdosed for me, but I was having gut issues. I was just like, this isn't working for me. So anyway, I think fruit can be, again, it's going to be personal tolerance. I mean, obviously people will say, well, carbohydrates are okay if you're an athlete and you're using them in the peri-workout period of time. And there's probably some relevance to that. At the end of the day, you don't want to be fat. I mean, I think that's a reality. Don't be fat. Don't, I mean, that's a lot of what health should be from.
Yeah, good way to look at it. Awesome. I greatly appreciate your time. And I got one final question, and that is what's next for Dr. Baker? You've obviously got this wonderful company in Rivero. I see you trying to dunk on Instagram, maybe break some more rowing world records. What's next for you in your future?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the personal like athletic achievements. Yeah, I mean, I've got, this thing as I get closer to 60, I want to sort of say, hey, things are possible at 60 we may not otherwise thought possible. So I'm training for that on a training side. Obviously, Rivero, we're super excited to be changing the healthcare paradigm. I'm talking, I'm being asked to talk all over the place with very different audiences now than I used to. It used to be everything was low carb. Now it's Bitcoin, strength coaching, some people have political ideologies that I'm talking to. So I'm getting asked to speak at more and more events. I'm probably going to look a little bit into, some of the stuff that improves health span. I mean, I think that's something that I've got in the back of my mind, particularly as it pertains to the musculoskeletal system. Like I said, the ability for me to dunk a ball at 60 is unusual. I mean, granted, I'm tall. I'm a 6'5" guy. People will, but even among professional NBA athletes that are 60, there's very, very few of them that have been able to do that after age 60. And there's very real reasons why that occurs. As we age, our tissues change in the quality. And I think there are things you can do to mitigate that and reverse that. So I'll be looking into that as well down in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate your time, coming on here and sharing your knowledge with all of us. Where can people find you? If they obviously you've got them Joe Rogan episodes, a great YouTube channel. Where can people go if they want to hear more from you?
Yeah, so let's see, my social media. I've got a YouTube channel, Shawn Baker MD. I've got a Instagram account, which is Shawn, so SHAWN Baker BAKER 1967. I'm on what was formerly Twitter, now known as X, at SBakerMD. Got a TikTok channel, which I'm embarrassed to admit, Shawn Baker MD. Of course, carnivore.diet, where I kind of hold court every day there to talk to people that want to come into our community. And then, of course, Revero.com, REVERO.com. If you need a physician that is carnivore friendly, that wants to get you off medication, that wants to treat root cause and provide you all the support that's necessary to help you get there. So those are the places.
Awesome. Shawn, you're a legend. Thank you very much. Cheers.
All right, man. Take care. Thanks much, Max. Appreciate it, bud.
If you enjoyed this video, you'll also enjoy this interview I did with Dr. Ken Berry the other day.